Okay, so the benefit of this, of course, is that we're not actually going to be causing any exhaust fumes. However, this process is actually quite expensive in order to do this, and it doesn't really guarantee, like the oil is still actually going to be remaining inside of the water. The only thing that it's doing is it's being spread out amongst a further area of water. So it could be washed out to sea or downriver to like a different lake. So the oil is still actually there. It's just kind of more diluted down. It's basically watered down. So when we're looking at this, like I mentioned, it's actually more beneficial to do a combination. So perhaps they do the skimming plus a dispersal agent. Maybe they do a dispersal agent and then burn what's left over remaining on the surface that they couldn't get. So combinations of methods, very rarely will you have only one thing being used. Another source of pollution for aquatic systems are plastics. Okay, so plastics are very harmful, actually not only in terms of the fact that they are not biodegradable and they stay in the environment for many, many, many years, but another part to this is actually the manufacturing of the plastic. So in order to make plastics, a lot of the time the companies that will do that, they're using a hydrocarbon oil-based fuel in order to do that. So actually, not only are we making the plastic that is difficult to decompose, but also we are creating those toxic fumes that are going into the atmosphere through the burning of fossil fuels. So every year, of course, many plastic water bottles and plastic containers are placed into landfills worldwide. Okay, only a small fraction is actually recycled, and that goes for a lot of reasons. So sometimes people will put a recycled product into the recycle bin that shouldn't be there. So it's very important that when you recycle things, that it goes into the appropriate recycling outlet. So if things have to go into the green bin, right, you put them in the green bin or the blue bin, or the compost waste, right? So a lot of times, even when people do put the things that should be in the blue bin, maybe they're not cleaned out properly. So for example, let's say a yogurt tub. So perhaps the plastic of the yogurt tub is actually recyclable, but if people don't put it into the recycling bin properly cleaned, they're actually not able to recycle that. So a lot of the plastics that people end up putting into the recycling bin are not placed there correctly, so they actually end up in landfills anyway. So it's very important that when you do recycle that you follow the steps that are involved with doing that properly. So what ends up happening to this plastic? So a lot of it ends up in landfills, but some of it can end up in waterways or oceans. Okay, so actually, you may have heard of this before. So in the Pacific Ocean, so oceans all have currents. So these light blue kind of squiggly lines here are representing the currents of the ocean in the Pacific. So what happened over time, and this didn't just happen overnight, of course, so the plastics accumulated in the Pacific Ocean. So what happens is, as the currents kind of swirled it all together, it started to come together to form basically a big mound of garbage, a big mound of plastic. So currently, this mound of plastic is actually huge. So Texas is one of the biggest states in the United States. If you take a look at it on the map, it's very big. So this is currently twice the size of Texas. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's bigger than that currently. So not only that, it's also very deep. So this is just to show you an example of how deep roughly it is. So this is the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. It's about as deep as that is in the ocean. So you have basically this huge floating island of just plastic and garbage, just from people not disposing of things properly. So you may think that, well, what's one person going to do if they just throw a water bottle out the window? I mean, you have a million people do that, and it's going to really accumulate. So a lot of times people think that what they do can't have an impact on the environment. But one good deed or one good thing of doing it properly leads to many good things. Same with the other way around, right? One thing that's done improperly can lead to many things being done improperly. And now we have this big problem. And actually, scientists are currently trying to think of ways that they can actually start to dissipate this, but it's actually just too big to currently do much with it. So hopefully, as more and more people become aware of the situation, we can rectify some of our past faults. Okay, so I've already mentioned some of the plastics dangers. So I mentioned here already that plastic consumes lots of amounts of oil that results in air pollution. So I've mentioned that already. So you may or may not know this, but some plastics are actually, over time, they do break up into smaller pieces. So what ends up happening is that aquatic life may ingest some of these small pieces of plastics. They call them microplastics at that point. So what ends up happening is it causes blockages either in the animal's airway or the digestive system, and can eventually lead to their death. Okay, so the next part of this, we're kind of stepping away from pollution, but we're going to look at different ways that we can assess the quality of water in an aquatic system. Okay, so there are three main signs of indicating the health of an aquatic system. The first is if there's a lot of living things there, the amount of oxygen that is present, and the acidity of the water, which we actually already looked at when we talked about acid precipitation. So one thing that indicates a very healthy ecosystem is having an ecosystem that is full of life with many different organisms, many different species, many different types of organisms within different trophic levels, right? So we have fish, plants, invertebrates, bacteria, plankton, birds, amphibians, things living nearby, right? Usually the more diverse the organisms are within an area, the more healthy that ecosystem is in terms of aquatic ecosystems. Now, of course, if you have an indicator species, this makes it easier to know if you are assessing the quality more or less. And actually, we talked about indicator species in the very beginning of this unit. So usually it's a type of species that scientists or biologists will monitor over time. And usually you'll choose something that has, that's not a producer, but it's not a top carnivore either. You want something that's kind of in either the the second or third trophic level, so you can monitor different things that are eating it and what it is eating. So the first lesson we talked about frogs as being an indicator species, but you can use insects or shrimp or clams or worms. Of course, we're talking about aquatic environments here. So, of course, if all of a sudden you see a huge spike in the population or a huge drop in the population, both of those scenarios would indicate that something is happening in that ecosystem. So it's always nice, especially when you're trying to monitor the health, you want to keep an eye out on a few different species. Okay, so the second way of monitoring the health of an ecosystem is to look at the level of oxygen in the environment, or I should say in the water itself. So oxygen that's in water has two sources. So oxygen in the air will dissolve into the water, okay, but most of the oxygen found in water systems is from photosynthesis of aquatic plants, right? So we looked at the carbon cycle. We know that plants and producers perform photosynthesis. So a lot of the air, oxygen that is in the water, is coming from photosynthesis itself. So what is using up oxygen that's in there? So any living thing that is doing cellular respiration is going to use up that oxygen. So oxygen is being removed by cellular respiration. So remember that plants can also do cellular respiration at nighttime, right? When the sun is not out and it can't do photosynthesis, it will use up its reserves by doing cellular respiration. Other living animals, or that includes fish and amphibians, and of course bacteria will also do cellular respiration. So oxygen is being put into the water in these two processes, but is being removed from the water by cellular respiration. Now, the temperature of the water can also have an impact on oxygen levels. So usually the warmer the water, the less oxygen is dissolved in it. Okay, so obviously we're talking about many degrees of difference. So if it's 5 degrees one day and 4 degrees the next day, it's not going to drastically change the oxygen. So what I'm referring to here is, let's say you had a lake that is in South America where it's very warm in comparison to a lake in Northern Ontario, right? They're going to have different levels of oxygen there because the temperature of the water is generally very different. So the amount of oxygen that's inside of water will tell us how much that water is actually able to support life. So we just finished talking about up here how living things all need oxygen. So the living things that are found in water need oxygen as well, of course. So when you are removing oxygen, what happens is there won't be enough for plants and animals and other living things to do cellular respiration. So the level of oxygen is very important for in terms of like how many living things are able to be sustained in that area. Okay, so one measurement of this is called the biological oxygen demand, or BOD for short. So the BOD measures how quickly oxygen is being used, and actually the focus of BOD is looking at microorganisms. So when I say microorganisms, I'm actually referring to decomposers here. Okay, so microorganisms or bacteria are essentially the decomposers within the water. So decomposers, of course, we learned already, are very important to healthy ecosystems because if there is any sort of dead bacteria, or any dead organisms whatsoever or waste, the decomposers essentially will break that down. So the more oxygen demand, so think of like the term demand, right? Demand is like a want or a need. So the higher the demand is, it means that there's a higher need for oxygen, right? If there's a low demand, that means there's not a lot of need for oxygen. So you end up having essentially the number of decomposers that are inside of an aquatic area will have a different reliance on how much oxygen it needs. So we'll look at this in the last part.